We've already prepped the entire cape. We've got it ready to go. The next step is going to be prepping the mannequin. And for today, we're going to be using the Bill Lancaster mule deer form. And a few different approaches as far as mannequin preparation goes. I like to start with the nose and get it done first. What we're going to do is we're going to remove the end of this nose, install a septum that you will need for, obviously, for a competition mount. I do the same process for a lot of my commercial mannequins just because it gives me a little more access to get inside that nostril and put the detail. I've got hack marks on the top of this mannequin so that when I cut it and remove the end of the nose, it will allow me to line it back up again, putting it back on. And it depends on the size of the septum that you're using. I like to go 1/2 inch to 5/8 behind the back of the nostril opening. That'll give me enough room to get the septum in.
Now obviously you want to use a real thin blade, like a hacksaw blade.
As thin as possible. The thicker the blade, the more you're going to end up taking a bigger gap out of here and reducing your nose to eye. So the thinner is always the better way to go. For dremeling this nose out, I'll use a guide. This is one of a few different nose reference casts that are available on the market, and we're going to kind of use it as a guide on the back of this. It's got a good example of the septum and the inner nostril passages, and we're going to try to duplicate that, so we'll set that down. And for dremeling this out, I like to use a small drill bit inside the Dremel. Depending on how long that drill bit is, you may have to run it a little bit further out just to give yourself some room to get in there. Now we've got the initial start to dremeling this out and a couple notes on how deep. You can kind of personalize it a little bit, but try to stick with your reference, whether you've got two-dimensional photographs for reference or a three-dimensional reference as we've got here. The back shelf of this nostril opening, usually if you look at it from the side, from this right here, you should not see, as you look down inside here, you should not see that shelf behind this right here. So in other words, when you look at it directly from the side, this shelf that's down in here, right there, you should not be able to see when you look at the nose from right there. There you see it, and there you don't. So as you're dremeling this nose out, keep that in mind. And also, for reference, be careful with the reference that you use. This is a great example of the inside of a nostril, but does that make it 100% right? You're going to have to make the call. There are certain things that I like to run the inside of this nose a little bit thinner so that this area right through here is not too thick. At some point in time, if you run that too thick, there will be a judge at a show that'll point it out that the distance between the front of that pad and to right here needs to be very, very thin. Next step will be coming in from the back. I like to get the initial start of that nostril opening from the outside, and then I'll come in from the back. Now, some points to make here are the fact that you're going to have a septum, and for today we're going to be using the septums available through research. This is a medium mule deer, and I like to personalize this a little bit for ease of being able to get it in there. I will take this down a little bit. You'll notice that this is a little bit taller on the top of the septum. It's also fairly wide. I like to remove that. It just gives me a little bit more room to play around on the inside of that back of that nose. But on the back, our septum's going to go approximately like that. You can also take and use for the back of the nostril wing. This is a really good example of what you're trying to do with the Dremel. So we're going to remove this area here, and to facilitate sliding the septum in, we're going to have to remove this area right in here as well. But initially I'll start with the outside nostril passages, and the last thing I'll do is remove this area right here. Now at this point we've got basically a septum that's made of styrofoam in here. We've got our inner nostril passage roughed in. You can come in with a small file, get a little bit more detail on the inside of that nostril, and at this point in time, if you wanted to go ahead and smooth that septum down, the styrofoam septum, you could actually come in from the front with a Bondo fiberglass mixture, make it fairly soupy, drip it in through there, let it drain out the back, wipe off any excess, and you'd actually have a septum that doesn't quite have the detail of an aftermarket septum, and you won't be able to see through it, but for a customer commercial mount septum, most of the time it should do real well for you. Give it a little bit more detail than just coming in through the outside. Coming in through the back allows you to get a little bit more natural septum in there. But for our purpose today and for a competition, we need to be able to see through that septum and get some of the detail that's in the cast. So we're going to go ahead and remove this section of foam and replace it with an aftermarket septum.